You're listening to The Art of Procurement, episode 124.
Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi there, wherever you are in the world, listening in to today's Art of Procurement, and I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Today on the show, I'm joined by Kevin Giblin. Kevin is the head of Global Sourcing and the Chief Procurement Officer at Dun Bradstreet. And prior to Dun Bradstreet, Kevin has enjoyed a number of different roles of increasing responsibility across really the entire procurement value chain at companies such as McGraw-Hill Global, which is now known as S&P Global, and Siemens. In today's show, I talk with Kevin about his quest to increase internal client satisfaction with procurement. Kevin shares with me the journey that he and his team took from identifying a cause of much concern among the stakeholder community to the rollout of a new process. And Kevin shares his key decision points and the lessons learned that led to a 40% increase in customer satisfaction in just 5 months. I was introduced to Kevin by my friends over at ProcureCon. And as you may know, I've mentioned this before, Art of Procurement is a media partner for the upcoming ProcureCon Indirect East Conference, which is taking place this March. It's March the 6th through the 8th at the Omni Champions Gate Resort in Orlando in Florida. ProcureCon is a gathering of over 300 procurement leaders, and there'll be more than 40 interactive sessions from inspiring speakers from some of the best brands in the world, companies such as Neiman Marcus, the American Cancer Center, Deutsche Bank, and of course Dun Bradstreet. Well, the event is just a week or so away, so if you find yourself with an opening in your calendar and a desire to learn new strategies or validate existing ones from peers across procurement, just head on over to artofprocurement.com/procurecon. That's artofprocurement.com/procurecon to find out more. And as a media partner, ProcureCon is passing on a 20% discount to Art of Procurement listeners. So just use the registration code PI17ART. That's PI17ART. Okay, well, with that being said, let's go straight into my discussion with Kevin. So hi there, everybody, and welcome to today's Art of Procurement. Today, I'm joined by Kevin Giblin. Kevin is the head of Global Sourcing and the Chief Procurement Officer at Dun Bradstreet. So, Kevin, welcome to the show.
Great. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm delighted you were able to join me. And the first question that I have, it's one that I'm actually starting to try and ask more and more as a first question. What are you passionate about right now when it comes to the day-to-day work, the impact that has on the procurement community?
Well, it's a great question. I think what I've always been passionate about is the people that I'm surrounded with, whether it be team members or customers that I serve, or even suppliers. Let's not overlook suppliers. So being passionate about having that relationship building is really imperative in any role, but it's really important in procurement because procurement is a service function to the organization.
Right.
And a service function is only good as the people behind it.
Right.
So I'm always passionate about the interaction with folks, and I think that really helps drive success in procurement.
Do you think that makes a big impact with suppliers? Because suppliers aren't always used to a procurement organization kind of treating them with, it's almost just, respect. And does that impact the kind of nature of the relationships you have with suppliers?
Yeah, I think it does, because the struggle some folks have in the procurement world, and I like to stay networked and talk to my colleagues all the time. Some companies are large by size of the company as well as by spend, and some companies are middle of the road, and some are small. So what helps to drive a better relationship with a small customer with small spend with a supplier? Why would that supplier want to give you a better deal,
right,
for example, or why would they want to work more closely with you? I find that if you treat your suppliers like your internal customers, your stakeholders, it does go a long way, and they actually want to do more for you.
Right.
And so it's all about educating them on what it's like to do business with your company, or in this case, my company, giving them some level set and expectations from the very beginning. It helps smooth the contract piece of it, and then ongoing feedback is really important. Tell them things are doing well, things that they can improve upon in the moment at the end of the year at a business review.
Right. It's interesting you mentioned the contract there, because I feel that it almost takes the relationship being from one that's measured by a contract to one where you put the contract in place on day one, and it's something that is there maybe as a last resort in case something happens, but you have that contract and never look at it again.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's signing an agreement and walking away is the worst thing for either the company or the supplier to do. It should be a living and breathing reference guide for, okay, let's expand on this. Let's make sure that the contract terms are being followed. But what else can we do together?
Right.
What else can we collaborate on that goes above and beyond that contract? And suppliers love to hear those kind of conversations.
Right. So from your vantage point, what do you think the health of the procurement function is right now?
I think the health of the procurement function depends on the organization. I've always championed the fact that procurement is a microcosm of the business world. And what I mean by that is if you think back to when procurement was once known as purchasing, and then it was maybe corporate purchasing, and then global purchasing, and then you added the word sourcing in there, which didn't even exist in the dictionary until sometime in the 90s. So supply chain, supplier management, SRM, supplier relationship management. The function constantly changes and evolves to keep up pace and trends with the business world in general. So I think that's the one thing that I think about procurement, that it aligns an organization's strategy. And the other thing is procurement should no longer be considered the organization that saves the company money. It should be the organization that drives and promotes the value.
Right. And is that the next evolution in your mind?
I think so. The consultants have that old expression, you can't save yourself from zero. And what they mean by that is if you're negotiating the same contract several times over a 10-year period, how much more can you cut off the supplier's margin and save money? Right. It's not about that anymore, per se. It's about what else can you and the supplier work together on to create more value for the organization. That's the key thing.
And so I'm always interested in a CPO's perspective, because you have the real world experience of, it's one thing talking about value, and it's something I talk about a lot, but it's another thing actually being able to do it when you're within an organization and on the ground, and, you take away kind of the consultant's perspective. How does your leadership team take the notion of the fact that, you're going to bring value over and above cost savings, and actually it might be at the detriment of cost savings, that essentially cost savings isn't everything?
Right, exactly. It's the best overall strategic value, and that's taken into account the company's brand. Don't want to overlook that. Something as simple as office supplies. That's one of those types of supply relationships that nobody has a great interest in. Everybody uses it, but it's not exciting. It's not a big deal. It's merely pens and paper. But what we've done is successfully promoted the fact that we've got almost 20% of our products using recycled materials, which is an environmental savings, but it's also saving us money because we're using products that are more efficiently made and manufactured. So it sounds like it's a very simplistic relationship, office supplies, but through that partnership and that value creation, we're also finding ways to influence our brand as far as being, environmentally conscious, but also the environment in general. So that's a great brand message.
And so how do you convince your CFO that's the strategy you want to pursue versus going and finding the lowest cost provider?
Well, I think what's really important for our organization is that we're driven by a number of different things. But we have the big picture is we have three key values. One is to be data inspired, another is to be relentlessly curious, and the third is to be inherently generous. And I think by being data inspired, it allows us to kind of look at every facet of the relationship. So again, it's not just about the cost savings. It's about, well, what else are we missing here? What's the big picture? And then be relentlessly curious about, well, what are some new problems to solve, and how can procurement help to solve that? Because by sheer discipline, the procurement function is kind of a hybrid between analytical, sales, and creativity. And so taking those three skill sets together helps us to come up with ways to succeed, and by helping others succeed. And that's the whole supplier relationship piece of it.
So you're kind of tying back your activities to the values of the company, to something that's bigger than yourself, but that the company believes in, so that you can align it with overall strategy rather than just, doing one thing in the moment, which may generate you some cost savings today, but it's not what you want to do as a company and what you stand for as a company.
That's right. That's right. Because at the end of the day, we look at supply relationships of what starts out small could end up much bigger, and it's not about the pricing, the cost savings. It's about the growth of the relationship. Our company is all about growth, sustainability, and continuing to be progressive and moving ahead. And if we share those values with our supply base, regardless of what cost savings we are, we're going to help drive the business.
So what's your greatest challenge as a CPO that you face at the moment?
I think there's a number of challenges. One is probably the biggest one, and I guess to directly answer your question is, how do we make sure that we ensure that we're mitigating risk, because that's really important to our company, while still balancing the fluidity and the agility to get our customer needs addressed as quickly as they need them to. And so to expand on a little bit, so we have a pretty rigorous screening process to ensure that our potential suppliers pass the muster of a whole bunch of different metrics, financial, solvency, risk, watch lists, et cetera. But then our customers may have a time to market concern where their products got to get out quickly, and they need us to hurry up and make sure we get that process rolling, because then what follows is the contracting piece. So we have to balance those two, but ensure that we're doing both. So that's the biggest challenge.
Is risk becoming more and more important to you as an organization, or do you think it's becoming more and more important to procurement as a function, especially with the things that are going on, externally right now?
Yeah, I think it's always been embedded in our organization. I think it's becoming a big focus outwardly. And I also think it's been pretty well embedded in our procurement function here. So for us, it's a regular part of our process. But it is a fairly new experience sometimes for suppliers to understand, boy, this is a lot that we have to go through just to be a supplier of yours.
Yeah.
So we've addressed that fairly recently too, with some supplier onboarding reference guides to help ease their process and give them a level set of the expectations of what they need to do in the short term and the long term.
So I'm interested in just asking one more question on the risk piece, because a lot of organizations, when they think about supplier risk, and the extent of thinking about supplier risk is actually doing a financial health check, and it's going and accessing, Dun Bradstreet data to do that. And I often think that's a great start, but that should only be the start. There's so much more to risk than just financial health. Yeah. So I wonder, what other kind of risk factors do you focus on when you're assessing a supplier risk in addition to financial health?
Sure. Great question. There's a number of factors, but I'll just, the simple view of it is the financial risk factor, or the financial risk assessment, only tells one part of the picture, and also only tells the backwards looking approach, because the financials come out after the fact. They don't come out before the fact, right? So say, this suppliers have exactly. So that's one factor, but it's not the only factor. Then you have the performance risk management. So the supplier's service level agreements or metrics, that the KPIs that they're being measured on, how are they addressing those? That's kind of the present thinking. But there's still something missing. So you can have a predictive indicator of what they've done in the past financially and how they're performing to the contract. But what's missing then is the forward-looking. So it's their sustainability objectives and how are they meeting them, their growth objectives. Are they looking to expand operations in a few more countries and open up another 2 offices and add a couple of thousand employees? And are they actually consolidating? So let's just say that the financials are well and the performance is well, but the forward look is not a good indicator. Then that's something we have to watch more closely going forward.
Do you look at risk associated with a product or service that you're buying in addition to the supplier risk itself? So, I look at it as 2 different components. One is how risky is the supplier, but how risky is what you're buying? What you're buying actually may necessitate a different level of risk assessment on the supplier, or no risk assessment, because it's something that just is inherently, available in the marketplace with no switching costs, lots of competition. Do you take that into account when you're thinking about risk?
Yeah, we absolutely do. And if you recall, several years back, there was a big issue with lead-based products in particular out of China. So if the supplier passes all the muster from a risk standpoint, but through their supply chain, there's some products that potentially could be putting us at much, much bigger risk, and we don't know the nature of the product materials, then we're going to do some more due diligence to go all the way down the supply chain to do that. I think that's really important. It's sometimes overlooked. In fact, the example I mentioned about the lead-based products in China, we took that a step further. We asked one of our suppliers, our promotional product suppliers, to put us in touch with their local representative in China to tell us how they were mitigating the risk on that.
Interesting. Yeah, it's kind of going deep into the supply chain, but also that it's not all about the risk of the supplier. There's risk with what you're actually buying itself, and that can be irrespective of who the supplier is that you choose.
That's right.
So what I wanted to do today, and the main reason for our conversation was that, you've recently undertaken a really successful project to improve the experience of your internal customers when it comes to engaging with third parties. And I know that you've achieved some fantastic results, and I actually want to touch on them before we wrap up. But I wanted to start just at the beginning of the journey that you took to really, improve and look at improving customer satisfaction. So
sure.
Just to start off, I wondered why or how did you identify the supplier engagement process, which is, what you sought to improve as a problem that actually needed a solution?
Yeah, I think if you recall, I had mentioned a little bit earlier on in our conversation how important the relationship with customers, suppliers, and stakeholders is for me and for our group. So that was the heart of this project becoming so important to me and our organization. When I started hearing feedback from customers that they either didn't understand the process, it was too complicated, it took too long, they didn't understand some of the steps that were involved in engaging with a supplier. It was unclear how they went about things. It was slowing up their daily activity. I took those seriously and I said, you know what? Our customers are really, really important here. And so let's try to investigate how we can improve this process.
And this is basically when they have a need to use a supplier for the first time. Is that right?
Yes, but also if it's an existing supplier, but a new engagement. So it could be a supplier we already know, but what they're now being commissioned to do is something entirely different. So we want to look at them in a different vein.
So how did you go about getting customer feedback to even start with? You said that, you got some feedback, I guess, anecdotally, but I know you went through a process that was a lot more structured, and this actually ties into the fact about data, and the importance of data. So I just wondered if you could talk on how you actually got the feedback that you needed to kind of figure out what the problem was.
Sure. Well, when I started to get isolated feedback, I listened closely. But when I started to get more of it, I said, let's really put this to the watermark test. So I issued a voice of the customer survey, and what I did is I chose all of the customers that had engaged with us over the past 12 months, and that was very easy to pull that data from all the queries into our potential suppliers. And I asked them if they would take 10 minutes to fill out the survey because we really need to hear their feedback. And the great thing about that is everyone was really interested in helping get their process improved, so they were happy to fill out the survey.
They saw benefits in them investing the time in doing this.
Exactly. It was for their benefit that we were doing, so they got that.
And how many responses did you get?
So we got about 26% response rate, which is a pretty good number to get for a survey, especially one that had an extensive number of questions like this one did.
And when you looked and you pored through all the answers, what were some of the main pieces of feedback that were kind of consistent?
So there was a lot of data to analyze. When I formed the project team, I simplified it for the team. I said, here's what we need to focus on. What our customers are saying loud and clear is we need to improve the supplier engagement experience and communicate more effectively. That's sort of the very simplistic approach, but I found that if we start from there and then work towards the end goal, at least we have this ultimate vision. Is if we ask the customer today versus what we asked them 6 months ago, what is your customer experience like? We want to get a much better answer now than we did.
Right. And was there anything that surprised you that came out of it, or was it all in line with what you'd heard anecdotally?
I think there were some customers who had no issues at all.
Yeah.
They completely got the process, and then there were some that were totally clueless and totally lost about what to do and understanding what the next steps were. So I think there were some surprises, and there was also some consistency in a lot of the surprises too.
Right. And so then one of the things that actually, when we come to talk about results, we talk about improvement. So I'm interested to know at the very beginning, how did you actually go about baselining the current state and attach some kind of data or number to that so that at least you had a place to start when you went back, 6 months later and said, okay, how did things improve?
Sure. There were two things I wanted to measure: the customer satisfaction level, and if the issue was, one of the issues was it was taking too long to engage a supplier, what is our cycle time today? So there were two different things we did. One, we did in that voice of the customer survey, how satisfied are you with the process today? So we had that as our baseline. And then we went back and looked at the 12 months of data to understand how long is it taking us on average to get a supplier onboarded. So those were our two baseline numbers, and you can't go forward and improve unless you have the baseline. So,
right.
So we made sure we took the time to do that.
And how did you get the CSAT, the customer satisfaction number, then?
So what we did is we asked them how satisfied you were with the process, and they were very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, not satisfied at all, or neutral. And so what we did is we wanted to get a percentage of who is satisfied and or very satisfied.
So it's basically
find what that is today.
Yeah.
A percentage, right? And then we would, do that again, a percentage check, the pulse check every interval of this project to see if we even, moved the needle and improved it.
Yeah, so the question was basically embedded in that original survey, so you could take the data from that survey that the folks filled out at the very beginning and use that as the baseline.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So when you started thinking about how to fix the process, what were some of those key steps that you took as you analyzed, okay, these are the issues, this is kind of where we want to get to. What do we need to do to make it happen? And, is it a people issue? Is it a technology issue? Is it a process issue? What was some of the approach in terms of actually building that strategy?
Well, we did a lot of whiteboard sessions, and what I did as we were putting some great ideas on the board and my team was solutioning, I stopped them in the middle of the meeting and I said, great ideas. What we're coming up with is really helpful, but we're thinking about this the wrong way. We're solutioning it based on what we want to see.
Right.
Let's go back and look at what the customer feedback is and what would they want to see. And that really helped the project moving forward from there. We really built a lot of momentum. It was loud and clear that we needed to communicate better. So what we decided to do is let's give them all the information they need as soon as possible in the process so they not only know what they have to do next, but all of the steps that they may have to follow. Give them access to all the forms that might have to be filled out either by themselves or by the supplier. And that way it took out of the equation any of the concerns about, well, what do I have to do next? Adding to that, we went and talked about the service level times that we could agree to, and we put that into that communication. Each step of the process, how long would it take for them to hear back from us?
And how involved were the internal customers as you were kind of whiteboarding the solution? Were you using the data from the survey as kind of your source of truth, or were you pulling certain internal customers into the conversations as you evolved what the solution looked like, so you knew exactly what it was that they needed and what they wanted? Yeah,
a combination of both. Yeah. And we thought of forming. It came to me one day that there's often new products that are out on the market, and how do these products get to market? Well, they establish some focus groups and let these folks test the product. They don't tell them what it is, what it's going to be, or who the company is, but they want to get their feedback. So what I decided to do is form a customer focus group and have 8 to 10 key stakeholders, and we'll let them volunteer to be on this. And any of the improvements we're suggesting, let's run it by them first. And if it made sense to them, great. If they had feedback on, well, you're missing the mark on something, we'd rather see this, we were able to kind of pivot and adjust it in mid-flight before it became published.
Right. And could you share really what the state, you talked a little bit about what the state was at the beginning, but can you share the changes that you made to the process? What were the major changes that you made to the process? And, what did it look and feel like when you were completed? And what were some of the key things that you changed that actually made the difference, to that process?
Sure. I guess the biggest issue was there were a number of folks that could be contacted to initiate an engagement, and that led to confusion. So what we decided to do is create a single point of, I call it the concierge service, a single point of contact and a single point of entry, meaning it would be a general mailbox we created that each team member would see as every request came in, but only one particular person would work on it, but there would be that visibility. And the single point of contact, the idea behind that was, even if there's a number of folks in the procurement function, this is the person you'll always contact for every engagement, and then they'll filter out to our team. And that made a big difference. Also, another change that we implemented was reference guides. One for internal customers. It's a desktop blotter, a plastic reference guide that they keep handy with them. It walks us through every step of the process. And another guide for suppliers. The supplier guide was a little bit more detailed. It had several pages to it, and that gave the suppliers a sense of some of the general terms of our contracts, not the whole contract, the general terms, and also what forms they would have to fill out and who they would have to contact.
Yeah, I think that's important because as a supplier, and I experience this now being on the other side of the table, you often kind of go into the relationship with a new client blind, and you don't know what to expect. You don't know what information is needed. You don't know how the communication is going to go. And so you end up honestly just emailing everybody and, hoping that somebody responds to you.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the frustration level was to a boiling point. So that was the first and foremost priority, was to fix the communication and awareness.
Yeah. As you whiteboarded and figured out what the new solution was going to look like and then implemented the new solution, I'm interested just to understand how much time of your team did that actually take? And if it was material, how were you able to kind of justify carving out their time to focus on this versus their day-to-day responsibilities? Because that's always the biggest problem to me, is we can think of good ideas, but it's really hard to find the time to actually think about them and execute them and then follow up on them.
Yeah, sure. It was a pretty extensive undertaking. What we did is we'd have three 15-minute meetings per week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, just a sense check on the activity. And then somewhere within a 3-week period, we would also have a presentation to our stakeholders on our progress that we made. And in between that time, we would have informal sessions to talk about our progress and to actually showcase what we were able to improve since the last time we met.
Right.
And so it was a big time-consuming effort. And how did we juggle their day jobs with that? We would have interchangeable team members where we may have one person participate on the Monday, another on a Wednesday. Maybe they're all there on Friday, or some combination thereof. So that way we can still balance, keep the lights on, let everyone's work still get done, but still focus on driving progress in the set.
And how long did this process start from start to finish?
So I had approached our Agile project lead in August when I started hearing some of the feedback. I said, I think this would be a really good project for our Agile efforts. Our company's really big on these. It went to the executive committee, and they agreed this would be a good project. So we formally kicked it off in September. Mm-hmm. And at the time when we did the survey, we found that only about 48% of our supplier requests were completed in less than 10 days. Yeah. And satisfaction level was probably about 33%. So,
right.
We had a lot that we could improve upon. Yeah. So it was good to have the metric there.
What was the result then? So you started working on this, it sounds like September. Right. We are now, as we record, February? So that's, my mental arithmetic isn't great, but 5 or 6 months down the line from when you just even began the project. Where are you in terms of results?
So, the proof is in the pudding. I always like to say, if we've made progress, let's actually see what the metrics are showing. And what I was really excited to see is So we started out with 48% of all requests being completed in less than 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
That's now at about 69%.
Right.
So that's 21% improvement right there. In addition, the average time to onboard a supplier has gone from 17.6 days to just under 10 days.
Right.
So that's a significant improvement.
Yeah.
And the better thing is the customer satisfaction was at 33%, and now it's about 70%.
Wow.
It continues to move upward.
And has that customer satisfaction number, while it's just a number, are you seeing the fruits of that in your actual relationships with your customers and the kind of day-to-day, I don't want to say feedback, but, just your relationship as you continue to evolve the relationship because you're taking away a pain point from them? Are you seeing that in the real world?
No, absolutely. And I try to take a simplistic approach. There were a lot of different constructive feedback in the voice of the customer survey.
Yeah.
A lot of data points in there. But I said to my team at the time, and it still holds true, I said, it's really simple. We'll know that the project is a success based on how our customers interact with us. And we have certainly seen a lot of folks have actually said, well, the process is much better now.
Right.
But I think the best measure of it is when I talk to my senior executives, and if I ask them this question in September versus now, two different answers. But when I ask them now, do you hear anyone giving you negative feedback about the process? And it's been really quiet. And, how people love to escalate when there's an issue, but there's been no escalation.
That's real. I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway from this. That's so important because, when you think about how our executives form their perceptions of procurement, it's often through people grumbling about things they didn't like, or that we're making the process harder for them, or we're just being a roadblock to them. And the fact that kind of I've always felt that muddies the water in terms of the positive feedback we get from people, because people are listening to the negative feedback more. So if you get rid of that negative feedback, then it allows the positive feedback that you get to shine and perhaps starts to try and change some hearts and minds amongst the C-suite as to the value that you can provide as a function.
Exactly. And it's really interesting too. It's a good correlation to, I mentioned our three key values, and inherently generous is one of them. And under this, it's, the whole premise is we succeed by helping others succeed.
Yeah.
And we welcome the help of others. And that's exactly how this project has been successful, because we've helped our customers, but I think we've succeeded by getting their feedback on creating the solution.
Right. And bringing them into it and engaging them, and, as you say, having them be part of it. So you're not doing something in isolation.
That's right.
So what's next? Do you plan to build on this further in terms of the supplier engagement process in reducing those metrics down even further, or kind of taking this approach and this that you did to attack this problem and applying it to other problems or other pain points that your internal customers may have?
Yeah, I think it's more of the latter. Mm-hmm. I think it can certainly improve more, but I don't think it will be improved as exponentially as it has been so far.
Right.
We've kind of brought it down to a pretty sustainable and comfortable response level. But what I like about this is we can now translate this same approach into everything we do, taking that same agile mindset and thinking about the customer, thinking about how we can be flexible, be efficient, and improve the customer experience with everything we do. I think it's a really good mindset to now have instilled in our team.
And what are some of the things that you learned as you went through that process and just applying that, that agile, I guess it's an internal framework, but it's just a way of thinking about your customer. Yeah. What were some of the things that you went in that maybe you learned through the process that you would then actually apply the next time you went through one of these projects to become even more effective? Either it's faster, it's more efficient, whatever it is. I'm just interested to know some of the lessons learned.
Yeah, I think engage everyone early and often. Don't overlook even the small suggestions and how they could be invested in the process. And also take a more simplistic approach. I mentioned the whiteboarding. So we would draw workflow diagrams and really complicated, very granular, every single step of the process.
Yeah.
And I think that's good to do, but I think it's really more important to be flexible and to take some of the soft approaches to this, the people aspect of it, what's going to make things better for the customer experience. And I think that, taking that approach has made it a much more nimble effort and more successful, quite frankly.
Were there any reasonings behind the kind of, I don't want to go to individuals, so the personalities or the backgrounds of the people on your team that you involved in the project? Or was it really you wanted to bring in everybody within your team and have them all on the journey, if you will?
Yeah, I think it was important to do that because there's different perspectives. They had different experiences with different customers, and I think we needed to address all of that and incorporate all their knowledge, all their experiences, just like we do with the customers, into the solution. We wanted one solution that would address all customers. It's a lofty goal, but I think the only way to do that is to bring as many folks in as possible.
So as we come to wrap up, I actually have a final question, and it's not actually related to the project that we talked about, but it's something, again, with your perspective as a CPO, I'm always really interested in this because I think it's something that we can all learn from. And it's just any advice that you would give to a procurement professional right now who's listening in and they're passionate about growing their career. Maybe they're an aspiring CPO. What are some of the things that you see people doing that you can, that they can learn from in terms of standing out from the crowd and putting themselves in a position to really, manage their career from a position of strength?
Sure. I think, two things. One, this isn't the old way of the purchasing mindset doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
This isn't about transactional reducing costs. What folks need to think about is be confident in your ability to help drive value through unconventional and different means and push the envelope for collaboration and innovation, because I think that's a really fantastic opportunity and future for the function.
Yeah, I like the notion there of unconventional, kind of thinking differently. And even if it's something that's not been tried before, at least it's, you're kind of thinking out of the box. I know that's cliche, but it's just not doing the same thing as maybe we've always done. And yes, there'll be things that don't work, but you kind of don't gain anything from not trying.
That's right. And the thing that I'll leave you with on this too is when I like to employ summer interns. I think it's a really part of their professional growth.
Yeah.
And what I like to tell them about what I like being in procurement is it's the only function where you can use creativity, salesmanship, interpersonal skills, analytical skills, project management skills. It's the only function I can think of that has all of those aspects that you bundle into one value proposition for your organization.
So as we wrap up, this is the easy question. Where can listeners contact you if they're interested in finding more about the project or just connecting with you and finding you online?
Sure. Well, I think, in this profession, as with a number of other professions, it's really important to stay connected, and I'm connected all the time. So easy to get in touch with me on LinkedIn. I respond to everyone. I think that peer-to-peer feedback is always important for professional growth, and I enjoy what I do, so happy to share words of wisdom.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Kevin, for your time today. I just really appreciate you taking us through the project and kind of the methodology that you took behind going through the process, because this is something that you can really apply to anything. I will include the link to your LinkedIn profile at the show notes today, and those are going to be at artofprocurement.com/DNB. That's DNB. And just thanks again, Kevin, for joining me.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.